All right, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 28th episode of Team Lease's webinar series. As many of you know, we have been conducting these webinars every week since the onset of COVID 19. The subject for today's discussion is Business Beyond COVID 19, Reimagining People, Process, and Technology. And to chime in on this, we have with us four eminent speakers today who are interestingly from four different industries. First, we have Mr. Aniruddha Kunte, Vice President HR at Cipla Limited, one of India's largest pharmaceutical companies, focused on both consumer products and selling active pharmaceutical ingredients, also known as APIs, to their partners. They sell over 1,500 unique products in over 150 countries. What strikes me personally the most about Cipla as an organization is that in the 85 years since their inception, they remain focused on providing ultra low cost generic drugs which can cater to all segments of the society. To talk about Aniruddha, he is an industry veteran with nearly 30 years of experience in various pharma and FMCG organizations such as GSK, Pidilite Industries, etc., in the capacity of an HR leader. He is also part of the COVID task force in his organization currently. He graduated from TIS, that is Tata Institute of Social Sciences, with a postgraduate degree in HR management. Pleasure to have you on our panel, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really a pleasure to be on the part of this group. Thank you.
Most welcome. Thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Ashwin Nair, Regional Director of Lindstrom Services, a Finnish textile rental services company, which is over 170 years old. They specialize in renting out industrial workwear and have operations in 24 countries with over 100,000 unique customers. Ashwin is another veteran with nearly 25 years of experience as a business leader across various organizations such as Moser Bear, Castrol, Asian Paints, etc. By way of qualification, he is an MBA in marketing from Pune University. It's great to have you on the panel, sir.
Thank you.
Then we have Ms. Devika Tandon, HR leader, commercial and R&D from AkzoNobel India. AkzoNobel is a global leader in paints and performance coatings with operations in over 80 countries and annual revenue of over euro 10 billion. Devika has worked in diverse industries in organizations such as Right Management, Religare, and Kane Oil and Gas. She has a master's in psychology, specializing in organizational behavior from Delhi University. Welcome aboard our panel, Devika. Last but most certainly not the least, we also have Ms. Neha Mayenka, HR leader at Mercer Consulting. The New York-based HR consulting firm is the world's largest outsourced asset manager with over $300 billion under management and another $15 trillion under advisement. It's a part of the Marsh and McLennan Group. Interestingly, Mercer acquired India Life in 2018. Now, India Life was founded by the founders of TeamLease before they founded TeamLease. So we go way back, I would say, as two organizations. About Neha, she's been with Mercer for over 7 years now and has worked for Absolute Data Research and Analytics and Scholastic India, among other firms. She obtained her postgraduate degree in business management from Sri Sringeri Sharada Institute of Management. Welcome to our panel, Neha.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so once again, for those of you who came in just now, the topic is Business Beyond COVID-19, Reimagining People, Process, and Technology. To put things in perspective here, it's been more than 6 months since the first lockdown in India was announced, and a lot has happened in the ensuing period. Our aim was to save lives in the beginning, justifiably so. But now, saving livelihoods has taken center stage. It's estimated that over 20% of India's working population lost their jobs during this lockdown. A week ago, the World Bank announced that it expects India's GDP to shrink by 9.6% in the current financial year, that is FY21, vis-a-vis the last financial year. And the outlook for FY22 is not that great either. It's expected that we'll grow at maybe 5 to 6%. Not so much on the back of rising consumer sentiment, but more because of the base effect. That is, FY21 will leave us with a much lower GDP. Now, we all know that this pandemic is a first for all of us. Nobody in their living memory remembers what it was to be part of the Spanish flu, which was more than a century ago in any case. Hence, projections are only so good and need to be taken with a pinch of salt. However, one thing is for certain. The way we go about our business, the way we look at people, process, and technology may need to change for good going forward. And that is precisely why we have assembled a fantastic panel of speakers here today across diverse industries and work streams as well. Viewers, whichever platform you are watching this on, please use the comment section to post your questions. You may receive the answers to some of your questions over the course of the discussion itself. However, keep them coming. At the end of the discussion, we will handpick some of the questions and pose them to the panelists, right? So to kickstart the proceedings, I'll start with you, Mr. Aniruddha. What are your reflections on the past few months? What has been the impact of COVID-19 on your business and workforce? Sir, you're talking on mute. We're not able to hear you.
Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. So I think, thank you very much for this question. I think crises have been common, whether it is industry, organization, people, or everywhere. I think Cipla also as a company has faced this issue. But we were amongst the first, I think, when the crisis started, when the pandemic was declared. I think from 13th March onward, we asked our employees to work from home. And the crisis was there in our manufacturing, crisis were there in the sales and marketing function, crisis were there in the logistic area. You name the area where we did not have crisis. And that is where the situation was all about. And I think that is the time when you have crisis, then you have, some solution and followed by that various action plan. So I will stop here for the crisis and the next question, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Ashwin, what has been the impact of COVID-19 on your business as Linstone?
Initially, definitely the impact was very, very wrong, negative. I would say the March end, which was the year end, financial year end, and April, the financial beginning for that matter. Both the initial phase was very, very negative, I would say. But as a company, which we are known for, we are very resilient and we bounced back. What was negative, we made it positive. We formed a task force. We created several, instruments in the organization by which we could find out solution to each of the crises that was, hitting us from all sides of the organization.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ashwin, do you want to go next? Same question again. So what's been your reflection of the past few months? What's been the impact of COVID on your business and workforce?
Yeah, so for us, basically, we were part of the essential supply chain, and therefore we were working right from the day one of the lockdown, which is there. And which means basically all the 13 units or 12 units across India were totally functional during this particular period. But having said that, while we were functional, many of our customers were badly impacted due to the lockdown. Sometimes some of them were not able to work because they were not part of the essential supplies which was there, or they didn't have the requisite permission from the local bodies which are there. And during this particular crisis, the most severe impact would have been for us the logistics part which is there, because there were a lot of interstate lockdowns which were happening, and there were material and goods movement were completely getting affected at between the state borders. And possibly that is one of the first of a kind of experience which anybody would have had, that India, the goods movement always has been a very free movement across the country. But this was the first time where in which we are actually finding a situation where two neighboring states, not allowing the goods from one state to the other state to move. And we really did not have any kind of a solutions for, doing this particular thing. But luckily, the government's also quickly realizing that, this is not the solution for, tackling COVID. And the borders opened up and the logistics came back on the picture. And we being in the service industry, logistics actually plays a big important role for us. Second impact, of course, would have been on the people because of the restrictions on the movement. And this actually impacted manufacturing at many locations which are there. Luckily for us, our people were, I should say, brave enough to, defy a lockdown and come for work. A lot of us actually turned up for work, bypassing checkposts and, passing through checkposts with, we at least have the relevant documents which are there, but still police were in the initial days, as you know, how they were behaving during those particular days which were there. So those were the initial challenges which was there. But as we moved ahead, the challenges started becoming from the supply side onwards, because from the demand side, everything actually moved to the supply side, because the supplies were getting affected every single point of time. And those were the bigger impact which we faced during this particular period.
Oh, great to hear the tone of optimism despite all these challenges that you are facing in your tone, Ashwin. Thanks for that. So Devika, can we get your thoughts on this? What's been your reflection on the past few months? What's been the impact of COVID-19 on your business and workforce?
So I'll begin with the business front first. Definitely, our industry was impacted, and it was nearly, a decline, I could say, 40 to 60%. While that was happening, it was not only limited to B2C, but even the B2B, because the industrial segment and automobile sector was impacted, and that led us to getting impacted, across the board. However, now with the festive season around the corner, we can proudly say nearly 90 to 95%, a recovery would have happened by now, and we are really, thinking that how we'll move ahead towards the growth agenda. If I look at from a workforce perspective, it was a switch on, switch off button for them. And it was a complete reset. We are not an organization primarily into work from home, because sales, it's a front running thing, manufacturing. But it was just a button off, and then everyone had to really shift from and work from home. That required a lot of reset on the workforce front, a mindset shift completely. Not only a mindset shift, but it required skills which maybe many of us did not really experience before. Working virtually, collaboration, networking, and how do you do all of this through a virtual platform? So the workforce definitely was impacted. But during all of this chaos that was happening, one thing that really stayed together with us, of us being together, and that helped us really sail through this entire environment, and togetherness and health and safety, I guess, were the base on what we stood last 7 months. And we are ready to go now and looking forward to the festive season.
Fantastic. Togetherness, health, and safety. Well said. Thanks, Devika. Neha, same question. So, what's been your reflection on the past few months? What has been the impact of COVID-19 on your organization and the workforce?
So, Bala, we weren't very different from many other organizations when the situation started. I mean, the initial phase of uncertainty, apprehension, anxiety was very much there for us as an organization as well, like it was for most other organizations. But I think being a consulting firm, the concept of work from home was not very new to us. So I think it was a bit easier for us to transition into that mode early on. And like Anirudh also mentioned, I think we were among the first few firms who extended the work from home option completely to all our colleagues way back in early March, way before even the government was mulling implementing the complete countrywide lockdown. So I think that transition came in much easier for us, but from an impact on people perspective, while it was an initial move, which was much welcomed by most of our people in terms of working from home every now and then to working from home every day and being able to spend that much more time with family, balancing between your personal and professional commitments. Of late, the conversations with colleagues have been revealing that yearning for being in office, being in person with your colleagues and meeting up, those coffee side chats are being missed quite a bit now. In terms of business continuity, we've been able to stay connected with our clients. I mean, as I said, work from home was not very new to us. So for us to stay connected with clients has not been a challenge. On the business front, it's been a mixed bag, to be very honest. As you know, the consulting line of solutions or offerings most often than not fall in the discretionary spend budget for most of the organizations. And that has been true for us as well. So while some of our traditional solutions and offerings have received a muted or a mixed kind of a response from our set of clients, we've received some very unique kind of queries or requests from clients. So for example, queries around workforce reorganization, restructuring, org design, policy formulations. A lot of organizations didn't even know work from home could work in their model and had never thought about a policy around it. So some of these requests have come our way, which of course have gotten us thinking into newer lines of revenue streams. So that's been the kind of impact on our business and on our people thus far.
Great. No, in fact, honestly, I can relate to what you just said, Neha. Thank you so much for that, because I started my career in a consulting firm. I worked there for nearly 5 years. So we used to work from home every now and then. But as you said, moving from working from home every now and then to working from home every day is a big shift. And that's when you actually start missing out what you are used to having, but you don't have it now. Sometimes the value of things that we have, you'll realize it only when you don't have it. So, yeah, great. Thanks a lot for all your views. Now, moving on, I think in this first question, we spoke about what the challenges have been. And I'd like to maybe now move on to how you have problem solved for them. So, Mr. Anirudh, again, I'd like to start off with you. So how are organizations reviewing the crisis, planning the road to recovery, and leading the new normal? And specifically about Cipla, maybe you can shed some light on that.
Sure. So I think I think crisis management has been one of the primary arm of Cipla, I would say. And whenever, in fact, there have been a crisis situation, Cipla was amongst the first company to lead it upfront from the front itself. So there are several examples where Cipla has been, in the forefront, whether it was pre-COVID, even when it was bird flu or when it was AIDS, which was spreading all across the globe. Cipla has been one of the first company, I think, to do with. And with that in mind, when this crisis hit us, a COVID task force was created. And I say, with what I communicated to you, I was part of that COVID task force. Now, this COVID task force encompassed all arms of the organization, be it in the sales and marketing area, or logistic area, R&D, and also manufacturing, because each of these functions has their own unique issues. Initially, the problem started with Metro first, and then it moves to the MOPSIL. And therefore, initially, we haven't faced as such any issues in our manufacturing side. But over a period of next 2 months, I think what got impacted is the manufacturing. And being in pharma, we were declared as essential services. And therefore, there was a huge government support. I must also tell you that, pharma industry is in a way blessed government, because they know that, the medicines would be manufactured by them, medicine supply would be done by them, and it will be available at a cost which is affordable to the, public. So I think all these, crises, there were several levers we put in place, and it was a weekly call. And I must tell you to the panel here and the entire audience here, several, levers have been put in place, including the hospitalization policy for the contract employees, hospitalization policy for our own employees. We created a team of people. So for example, I'll just give background to you. So, our India business, which is a commercial arm of the organization, they have very good connect with the, doctors and nursing stations, etc. So they were part of the team which managed, the EHS and other functions. So these two functions, which have never, in fact, interacted any time in the past, they came as a single team, and they understood the issues, they provided solution, and they have several, action plans were rolled out. We increased the coverage for each employee. We also increased the insurance coverage for the contract labor, which is possibly we are amongst the first company to do that. Though amount was less, but I think it has given a good benefit to them. In the crisis management, one of the things that we learned that this crisis give you huge opportunity, and therefore, in fact, I would tell you, several teams which has not worked together, they became single team. So I think crisis has given a good learning for us as a company, and this is a new thing. I think when they say that that difficult road always is lead to beautiful situation. So I think this crisis has given us this new ways of working, and everything is new. Sales and marketing guys have never worked in the work from home scenario. Just imagine a medical representative who wants to meet doctor, talk to him about medicine, and meet the stockist or retailer, has to work from home. He's operating everything from home today. So these are the kind of new learning I think this crisis has taught us, and possibly we have done it well.
Oh, fantastic. I think to me, the biggest takeaway is that, as you said, when people were working together in the same office physically, maybe they were not working as one team, but when they were working virtually from their homes, they still came together as a team because it was a common crisis and people had to come up with new ways of doing business. That's a great point. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Nivedita. Moving on, Mr. Ashwin, again, same question. So how are organizations reviewing the crisis, planning the road to recovery, and leading the new normal? And if you can, again, give us some perspectives from how you've managed that at Lindstrom.
Yeah, at Lindstrom, basically what we, right from the beginning of the crisis itself, one of the things which we immediately realized is that, we need to quickly move into digital space. For us, basically, that's not a new thing for us, because, a lot of our processes were already on the way to getting digitalized. And what we quickly did is basically that, whatever can be automated, whatever can be digitalized, we immediately put that into digitalization mode, which is there. We also found out what are the contact avoiding technologies which are available at the particular moment, or possibly available globally also. for us, one advantage was basically we operate in China also, and China is basically where the crisis started. So by the time the crisis came to India, we already had some kind of a template to look at China, saying that how they operated. Of course, they operated quite differently from us as compared to India. They had much more severe, more restrictions which were there during this particular period. But we at least knew, saying that what's ahead of us, what's coming ahead of us in terms of both customers as well as in terms of the processes which were there, and we managed to copy some of them from them. Some of them, of course, being Indians, we are very good at identifying and developing things of our own. Our Indian ingenuity is not less than anywhere else. So we quickly put in our Indian ingenuity along with some Chinese ingenuity. We managed to create a template for working. One of the most important part for us during this particular period has been the communication, and there were daily business continuity meetings which were there. The top leaders were actually communicating to the second rank, and even up to all the way down to the workers who were there, and which is basically that we opened that communication channel so that digitally, of course, basically with the help of Teams and other softwares which were available. And this is something which actually kept the spirit high even during this particular time. So for us, the most important thing is basically keeping those people motivated, because they were willing to come to the work. But then at the end of the day, there's always a scare around everywhere, saying that, it's the initial phase of the pandemic. We don't know what exactly is going to happen. There is no medicines, there is no treatments which were available at that particular time. In fact, it is not available even this particular time, but it was a new experience for all of them. And therefore, keeping those communication channels open was one of the key things which we did during that particular time. Second thing which we did during this particular time is basically, contrary to the popular, this one, we actually trained people during this particular time. In fact, I think in the past 7 months, we have put in around 5,000 hours of training to our people. That's a massive amount of training, which possibly I would have never seen in Lindstorm in the last 6-7 years. And why this training was required is because we wanted to move people's capability to the next level, where in which they are able to interact digitally, where in which they are able to talk to their customers digitally, talk to our suppliers digitally. Moving everything into a digital platform was imperative, and therefore that's what we did. And that's actually stood us in good stead during this trying times which were there.
Oh, fantastic. I think 5,000 hours of training during this lockdown must have been a very unpopular decision, but it's great that you pulled it off. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, thanks to my HR team, they really stepped out of this one. And like Mr. Kunde mentioned, most of us, a few of us had training experience, but every single department actually pulled into, share their experiences to, train people and, get them going for each of those, including the funniest part is basically we have this periodic audits, because we are related to hygiene industry. Audits are very part and parcel of our daily routine. During this particular time, almost every unit went for they are undergone at least not less than 10 digital audits. Okay. Auditing using digital technology itself, it was a completely different experience for me, because typically, when a DNV auditor comes, you typically spend the entire day with the DNV auditor, doing things, looking at documents, looking at other things. But somebody doing the entire stuff digitally, that was a completely novel experience for us. For most of us, we are doing it for the first time. In fact, we underwent customer audits during this time digitally, which was a completely different experience altogether for us.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for that perspective, Mr. Ashwin. Ms. Devika, can I get your thoughts on the same question again?
Bala, I think, Ashwin and Anirudh have already covered most of it. And each organization, I feel. So let me take it into two parts then. So on the crisis front, I guess all of these enablers that I've got mentioned of communication, safety, learning, virtually, in terms of seeing that, okay, how digital can be imbibed faster, all of those were put in place. But now, if you look at it, it's been 7 months now, and we have done all those things, and committees have been formed. The second part of your question, that how do you lead from here, really, lead the way from here, is something that we are really focusing on now, because we really don't know when this is going to end. So clear cut, I was noting down some points. Clear cut, the focus is around having a view which is short term, which is very here and now, so that we are able to deal with any uncertainty. but at the same time, having a long-term view to see that how organizations can be really move towards growth, and that agenda is very much back on our radar as an organization. And as a leadership team, we are focusing on that. Second point, which is very important, not only for ExxonMobil, but I feel for all the organization, is around cost consciousness. We all during 7 months really learned the value of cash being available, and be it professionally, personally. Hence, any organization that can build that in the DNA of the organization across levels, that consciousness will go a long way and definitely then move towards the growth agenda. Third, and very important, is keeping the customer at the core. And right now, whichever sector we are in, or whichever whatever products or services we are delivering, one of the agendas for us is really seeing that how do our processes, how do our ways of working really change from a customer perspective? Will our products get revamped? The way we reach out to the customers, will that really change? And that will really define the ways of working and leading in this new normal, because definitely the customer demands are going to change big time and have already changed. So those are some of couple of things. Needless to say, on top of all of this is really employee well-being. And while we are not over the crisis, but I guess this will define also looking at employee well-being from a very different lens over the next few years. Uh, Not only the organization putting the enablers, but also the employees demanding it in a way. So we'll have to come up with practices, tools, enablers, that we create an ecosystem for employee well-being, where not only them but even the families are included. So I guess these are some of the points that come to my mind there.
Fantastic. So if I got it right, you're talking about making sure that you get back to growing ways, at the same time focusing on cash conservation, but ensuring that employee well-being is also taken care of by and large.
Yes.
Fantastic. Great. All right. Uh, your thoughts on that?
Right, Bala, so again, I mean, not very different from the thoughts already shared by the other co-panelists. I think what has actually helped organizations sail through the crisis situation has been keeping empathy to the core. And being in the people business, this comes naturally to us. I mean, we've always been about empathy, we've always been about people, and that's what helped us drive through this situation of crisis as well. We also used this opportunity to launch a lot of new initiatives. So early on, when the crisis had just struck, we formed a cross-functional collaboration team, and then we had streams under those to focus on aspects related to clients, solutions, people, and processes. And we also took this opportunity of crisis to relook at some of our solution areas, some of our processes, which could have been made more efficient. So I think this was also an opportunity for us to redesign some of our processes to make them more efficient, look at some of our solution offerings and make them more resilient, as well as more innovative solution offerings to come out to meet the emerging needs of our clients. It also gave us an opportunity for all the opcos to come together. You earlier mentioned that Mercer is part of the Marsh & McLennan Group, and we have sister concerns under the same umbrella. Marsh being one of the leading players into insurance broking, we could leverage their connects to a large extent to extend enhanced insurance benefits to our colleagues, to ensure that there was that benefit of hospital. These were some of the opportunities for us to enhance collaboration within the organization across lines of businesses, as well as across our sister concerns as well. In addition, there were some initiatives that we launched at the global as well as the local levels. I mean, the leadership at the global, regional, as well as the country level was very forthcoming in terms of going on board, ensuring their support to the colleagues in this time of crisis. We went early on, our global CEO went early on record to mention that through the thick of crisis, there would be no salary cuts, there would be no job losses, and that's what we stuck by. So I think that gives a lot of comfort to employees that in a time of uncertainty like this, when you don't know what lies ahead of you personally as well as professionally, the organization is there to stand by you. We had a global fund that was set up for providing financial aid to colleagues who might need it in the middle of the crisis. And that's something which again provided a lot of financial cushion to people. And taking Devika's point a bit ahead, we focused a lot on employee well-being with a special focus on mental wellness in addition to other health and well-being initiatives. But of course, needless to mention, financial wellness also is equally important. I think that's one aspect which neither employees nor most organizations have had a very clear focus on. But this crisis has taught a lot around how financial wellness is also equally important and needs to be kept at the core. At the local level, we've had several communications, right from town halls to skip levels to HR outreach sessions, and ensuring that that pulse on the floor is always kept in touch with. And we've had several engagement initiatives virtually, though, but we've tried to engage Mercer families as well. As your office environment moves into the home and the lines get more and more blurred. It was only natural that we engaged the Mercer families and gave them a glimpse and a sneak view into the Mercer culture. And that's something which we've seen a lot of participation around. And of course, the learning interventions again have seen a lot of uptick. This was also an opportunity for us to ensure that there was a constant focus on learning going on. I mean, being a consulting firm, you couldn't place less value on learning interventions, especially in a time of crisis like this, when the need for reskilling and upskilling becomes even more important. So those have been some of the key focus areas for us. In terms of trends, we've also seen, I mean, again, I'll probably try and bring in a little bit of perspective from a consulting setup as well, because that kind of gets built into your DNA when you're working with a consulting firm. So what we've also seen is a lot of firms have come together in terms of temporary talent sharing. You see a lot of industries getting very severely impacted while the work has gone up or the demand for some of the other services have gone up. So we've seen a trend on organizations coming together in terms of temporary talent sharing, wherein you allow your people the continuity of their jobs and being able to also add to their skill set in a way. Within Mercer also, we've launched a platform of talent match, wherein we realized that different geographies for us were coming back to the recovery at different pace. And there was that clear gap in terms of skill availability that was available, the demand and supply gap, as you may call it. And we leveraged this opportunity for us to be able to bridge those gaps in demand and supply through the availability of talent wherever it was possible. So these are some of the initiatives that we as an organization have tried to focus on to kind of help the ship sail through and keep moving ahead.
Super. I think 2, 3 points really stood out for me over there. You made a lot of pertinent points. So one was obviously the fact that a lot of organizations talk big about empathy, but they don't really put their money where their mouth is. But you actually did that, right? Your group CEO just wrote a mail, as you said, saying that there won't be any pay cuts, any job losses upfront. It's not a post facto thing where maybe you got luckier than most of the other companies, but then even pre facto, you're taking the initiative. That's one, I think, point that really stood out for me. The second thing is that interestingly, you made a point about how you were able to leverage multiple group companies within Marsh and McLennan to leverage them. As you said, Marsh is an expert in insurance brokerage and so on and so forth. And likewise, it's not just within the group, but then you are also able to build a talent pool across various organizations as well and see if maybe you can use resources really well, whereas demand was coming down in one sector, but then going up in other sectors. So I think those are some very interesting points. I think it's a very unique perspective, I would say, compared to what we've seen so far. So it's great. Thanks for that. I think so moving on, we all know that virtual working has now entered business continuity and is now mainstream. Yeah, it's been in pockets, but it's now very much part of our usual way of doing work. It's also brought in some challenges along with it. Some call it teething problems. Some say that those problems are there to stay. What are some of the challenges organizations are facing? And how are organizations coping with these challenges amidst trying to get back to work? So it's that transitioning phase right now where we are trying to cope with the new normal, or maybe the new interim solution, as many people call it. And we are also trying to get back to the old normal, right? So how exactly are organizations coping with that is my question. And this time, I think I'll start with Devika. What do you think about this?
So see, I would say that virtual working has definitely, technology was one thing that helped us during this time. It helped us survive in a way, right? So, but it faced a bit of challenges also on one front. Organizations and physical spaces are really defined for collaboration and coming together and communication. And besides the structured meetings that we have, the way we are having, maybe we're having this with ease right now, but the unstructured conversations that come on the forefront, and those actually lead to a lot of innovation and collaboration and creativity. Somehow I feel that did get a bit suffered, and currently also is getting a bit suffered. Besides that, just when you're in office, there's a lot that you just observe from leaders, from your peers around, and learn. And that learning, while we all are doing, we did a lot of virtual learning, we did a lot of things through the e-platforms, but really learning face to face and motivation and getting inspired by the leaders, in the one-on-one interaction. I guess those things are really taking a hit in this kind of an environment. However, nonetheless, we can only do that much. And to mitigate some of these things, there are various platforms that we have set. Even Neha was mentioning about virtual coffee sessions. So we have it named as Cafe Chit Chats. We have put in place engagement platforms which are not like one-off initiatives, but long-term engagement initiatives running over 1 month, 2 months, where we involve families as well. We have also kind of increased our connect at across levels, leveraging the leaders in the organization and the HR folks and across everyone, increase our connect in a much, much more structured way so that we're able to get the pulse. Besides that, we implemented a very nice chatbot known as Amber, where we get the pulse of the employee on a literally daily basis and try to see that what actions need to be taken. Besides that, we also rolled out pulse surveys. So a couple of HR initiatives, but yes, definitely. We are just trying to mitigate those, and in the longer run, I'm not very sure really how much can only virtual sustain. It has to be a mix of both the elements.
Fair point. So you're saying only virtual or only physical, neither of them is sustainable. It has to be a healthy mix of both. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Neha, can I get your thoughts on that?
I think the challenges of the virtual world are not unknown to us, as Devika rightly mentioned. One of the challenges that I do foresee is keeping your employees engaged on a sustained basis. That's something which is going to be a challenge faced by most organizations. As organizations have become more open to the idea of working from home, it's not going to be unusual for most of the setups which were erstwhile not very comfortable with the work from home opportunity for their people. So keeping people engaged and motivated and keeping their productivity levels going on at the same pace is something which is going to be definitely a challenge. How do you ensure that you have the right technology supporting your workforce through a situation like a work from home on an ongoing basis is again going to be another challenge. Most of our people managers, for that matter, I mean, they're going through the situation themselves. They are mentally affected by the situation themselves. How do you enable them to manage virtual teams and get the most out of the team through this situation is again going to be the key. So I think some of these are going to be the norm. And for us as an organization, how we have looked into is, and again, the virtual engagement mode was not something which was very new. We have a multi-location presence, and whenever we would have an org-wide engagement initiative, that would largely be on a virtual mode, with the difference being that people would kind of join in from the different locations. At least colleagues from one location would come together into one conference room and then participate in the engagement activities that they were. What we have planned to do is have these on a sustained basis. And how do you ensure that you have innovative ways of engagement connects going on? Interest group is another initiative that we're thinking about, which allows you to come together with like-minded people and being able to pursue your hobbies as well. Now, one of the sessions that we did as a part of our engagement initiative during this lockdown period was also around gardening. And we had a lot of participation that we saw around that session as well. We've had a talent show done by Mercer Kids, and it was again another hit that we had. So innovative engagement means wherein you have families participating, you have virtual modes, you have interest groups, Another initiative to support people managers is around a people manager forum. We've been constantly speaking to our people managers, trying to understand from them what are some of the challenges that they are facing in terms of managing a virtual team. We've been feeding back the feedback that we've got from our HR outreach session to enable people managers to address some of the problems firsthand. Um, Technology, as I mentioned, to support the virtual working mode. Now, we were lucky that we had a full day workshop early this year, and we called it a Mercer Hackathon. And there were 4 key themes that we got out of that full day session. And we formed project task teams around each of these key themes. So one was around making Mercer an employer of choice. The other one was finding joy at work. The third one was around making life simpler at Mercer to focus more on process excellence. And the fourth one was to focus around learn and grow to enable career growth opportunities. And this was one opportunity for us to leverage the maximum potential out of each of these project teams. And mind you, these were not led by HR. Each of these project teams comprises of cross-functional representation. There is a steering committee that they do report their progress to, but it's all led by business and functional representatives, and they all come together, they come up with very innovative ideas. We've launched a mentoring program during this period. So I think some of these initiatives that we leverage the crisis period to launch in will go a long way in helping us craft our shape for tomorrow.
Lovely. I think talent show for kids. I think I was sold on that point itself. So it's a great initiative. I think, as you said, it's not necessary that HR has to lead and drive every single initiative, but then it has to be self-initiated, right? Which is probably the best way of getting your team together. Great. Thanks, Neha, again. So Ranitha, can I again get your thoughts on the same question? So while virtual working has ensured business continuity, it's brought in a lot of challenges. What are the challenges that you are facing in balancing virtual work and trying to get back to the physical way of doing work?
Sure. I think, what Devika and Neha has covered, I think in addition to that, I think what we need to understand, what was, luxury a few days before has become an essential part of the life, and what we are talking about, most of them are the office-based employees. Think about employees who are remotely working, so in the logistic depots, in the sales and marketing function, typically working in Assam or Bihar or some interior part of India, where connectivity has been a big issue till date. And also the available technology. Now, how do you infuse everything so that they are also they should feel that they are part of the organization. Now, it is easy for an office staff to virtually meet, virtually discuss, and, you have a good office, a good home, a reasonably quiet place, reasonably, though your children and pets and everything to disturb you, but I'm being still a reasonable. The power supply, the connectivity issues are limited, less. Think about people where technology is an issue. Think about people where they're staying in a cramped room. And it is not it's places like Mumbai, we have several colleagues who are working in the logistics, they are staying in one-room kitchen apartment. So if they have 5-6 members in their home, how do they manage? These are some of the issues that possibly we thought through, and we have provided necessary solution to them. These were not easy thing. I think virtually is easy for us to say, but it was really difficult for first 1.5 months to actually implement. We have even provided necessary training to employees in terms of, so what, Mr. Nair was talking about training. We also had some 10,000 hours of training, and of them 3,000 hours are only how do you use technology? How do you use Microsoft Teams? How do you use, Google, various platforms, etc. Now, this was a new thing. Virtual, I think, has taught us various things, but I think it takes physical and psychological toll, to be honest. Whatever we say, it's a huge thing it's not easy thing to manage. People do not have infrastructure, and they do not have, sometimes I think, sometimes they lack ownership of taking this onward. So it's a mix and match requirement for us. It's an hybrid model, which Devika was talking about, will definitely work for all of us. But it's a challenging situation, without a doubt.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ranitha. I think you made a very pertinent point. As you rightly said, somebody who is working in your logistic depots, who stays in a one-room kitchen in Mumbai with a joint family, that too on top of it, right? Even if you do training them is one hurdle, but then actually getting them to implement that is the very difficult second hurdle. And how to overcome that is going to be the long run for us, right? And as you rightly said, maybe for setups such as yours, which encompasses a fair mix of blue collar workers, white collar workers, gray collar workers, and everybody. And maybe you should have a proper hybrid approach in place. Great. Absolutely makes sense. Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Ashwin, can I get your thoughts on how exactly you've been coping with this challenge of handling work through virtual means right now and trying to get back to the physical way of doing work, the balance? How are you striking that now?
So for us, like what has been mentioned by Devika, Neha, as well as Mr. Aniruddha Kunde, okay, they hold true for us also. But apart from that, there are a couple of other challenges which comes up. For example, cybercrime just peaked during the COVID-19 period. I'm sure saying that you all must have read some kind of reports on this. So the security of the infrastructure itself became one of the biggest challenge by itself. You are using technology, but the technology itself became a challenge in terms of, you must have heard about things wherein a Zoom meeting has been hacked and, somebody else joins in who is not an invitee to that particular meeting. So those kind of things were actually the initial challenges which were there. Apart from that, apart from whatever has been mentioned, one more challenge which I really see is basically how the leadership actually takes this virtual and physical merging ahead. COVID-19 by itself cannot be a goal for an organization to move digital or virtual space. You need to have something which is far more beyond, which can actually enthuse people to use the technology which is there at every levels. Like Mr. Kunde was mentioning, Indian organizations typically comprise of people from various backgrounds, which are there from dissimilar educational backgrounds to dissimilar economic backgrounds, which are there. And therefore, it becomes imperative on the organization to integrate all these people into a similar thought line by creating a platform wherein which both digital as well as physical interactions are easily possible. So for us during this particular time, the biggest mantra for us was we basically communicate quickly and communicate often. Okay, this is something which we have been telling our managers who are managing people, that during this particular time, since you are actually at remote locations, you are not physically present with each other, do not hesitate to pick up a phone and speak to your people as many number of times during the particular day. And this, imbibing this change itself is a difficult thing. People say, how many times should I give him a call? I said, as many number of times you want to. Because please remember that you are not sitting across, in the office, you can walk across to a coffee machine along with your colleague and, discuss in front of that, or, you can walk across his desk and, sit down and have a chat with him. But today, that's just not possible. So, you need to imbibe those habits which can actually make it as, virtual, physical possible, enabled by the technology which is there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Even I miss all those water cooler conversations. Absolutely. You just randomly go there, have a cup of coffee, and then you chat up about something, right? So that's when you actually learn a lot of other things happening around us, not just about work. So yeah, I mean, as you said, sometimes it's probably the right thing to do to stick to the basics. Communicate as often as possible. That's it. It might sound very cliched. It may sound very old school, but it works, right? So great. Moving on. With COVID-19 becoming a part of life, I think none of us here are in disagreement about the fact that COVID-19 has become a part of our life and will remain so for a while. I just hope that it's not going to be a long while and it's going to be a short while. In this context, what does the future of work look like in terms of people, process, and technology specifically? And again, I would like to start off with you, Devika.
So to begin with people, maybe, I guess the next few years will be focused on unlearning completely. Unlearning and learning, reskilling, because be it as an employee, be it as a leader or a manager, the way we have led organizations in the past will completely change now. So on the people front, we'll have to be more agile in terms of reskilling ourselves, looking at roles which come up in a very new way in this new world, and that will be the focus. The second you said was processes, I guess, right? Uh, Processes will have to be, in many cases, worked from scratch. Any process which will have a slightest of inefficiency or hinder speed won't have any tolerance. Now, those can be business processes, processes focusing on the way we are interacting with the customer or for our employees. Anything which slows down speed, I feel, earlier we lived with it, but now we'll have to rework it. Third was technology. Technology conversations, interestingly, have been there for decades. Now, in the last 10 years, we have been talking about future of work and technology and digital and even in the HR space. More than really, I would say technology and digital, the time now is to have a digital mindset. And it's not about what tools you're implementing, because tools are easily available. And maybe the last decade was more focusing on the tools we are implementing. But now going forward is going to be a digital mindset, and that mindset will have to be reflected in collaboration, in networking, in innovation, with our customer processes, for our employees. As Neha mentioned, we did a talent show she was mentioning, and so for get-togethers. Earlier we had these offsites, but now get-togethers also will be through maybe a digital platform. So it's a mindset that, from a technology perspective, that we will really need to imbibe in the future of work.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. We have to learn to unlearn and then relearn and reskill ourselves for the demands of the future, which may not be the same as the demands of the present. So I think that's a great point. Uh, yes, it's adaptability is the key for the survival of any species, right? So you're right. And this is how it is manifesting during our times, I would say. Thank you, Devika. Neha, can I get your thoughts on this? So what do you think the future of work is going to look like on the parameters of people, process, and technology?
I mean, we all agree the impact that COVID has had. I think in our collective lives, none of us have seen a crisis of this magnitude, which has had a global impact to the extent that we're observing now. And while most of this year was focused largely on sustenance for most of the organizations, I think what the next phase is going to be about is focusing on growth, efficiency, and building resilience into your inherent systems. Now, when we talk about growth, it won't be just about growing your existing set of solutions or offerings. It would also mean including newer revenue streams, newer and innovative revenue streams, being adaptable to what the market is asking of you. So what the COVID-driven market behaviors have brought for you, you respond to those as an organization, as firm, and as leaders. So that's something which is going to be paramount and key. How you measure the performance of your people, how do you set your goals, how do you set the performance criteria, and how do you ultimately end up measuring those, is again going to be a important point of consideration going forward. This year as well, we've had several instances wherein we've sat down for a business review, we've changed our goalposts through the year, and we've also re-looked at some of our performance criteria. I mean, you can't hold your people accountable for the same set of performance goals that were set for them in the beginning of the year, and that has to, I mean, you have to have that flexibility in your systems, to allow for that flexibility in your systems and your processes to include newer goalposts, or to kind of accommodate for any changing goalposts that you may encounter through the year. And of course, role of technology is going to be paramount. I think, a lot of us would have seen those forwards and those jokes that who has driven the technology agenda for you this year? Is it the CTO? Is it the CEO or the CEO? And a lot of people end up saying that it's the COVID which has driven. So I think technology is going to be at the forefront. Most of the competencies that we will look at in terms of roles also will essentially have some element of technology as an inherent part of those competencies. So I think these are some of the things that organizations will have to keep at the forefront. From a people perspective, I think workforce composition is also going to be a key consideration now. The recent labor code that was also released also talks about putting a lot more structure around the gig workforce, right? So these, combined with the impact of the COVID, will have a long-lasting impact on how organizations look at their workforce composition, how they look at their reskilling and upskilling of the existing workforce, and how do they go about leveraging the potential of their people to the best. And last but not the least, as a firm, we need to balance empathy with economics. I mean, at the end of the day, some organizations may be compelled to take difficult decisions in terms of cost containment measures, but how you treat your employees during this period is going to have a long lasting impact on how you are perceived as an employer. So it shouldn't be just the short term objectives that govern your decisions as a firm, but I mean, organizations need to have a long term view in mind. And that is where balancing empathy with economic of the organization is going to be key.
Sure. So basically, what you're saying is that you need to be in a position where you can accommodate changing goalposts, where you can accommodate maybe changing workforce composition as well, and figure out a way for that. And according to you, technology is an enabler for making all these things happen. Right. At the end of the day, as you said, while empathy would ensure that you accommodate all of these things, but it has to make sure that it turns out into some sort of tangible outcomes for you at the end of the day. Yeah. All right, perfect, fair. Mr. Aniruddha, can I get your thoughts on this? On with COVID-19 becoming a part of life, what does the future of work look like in terms of people, process, and technology?
I think to me, people would be people, and therefore, you will have to use logic and emotion both in managing them. I don't think crisis will change them because people, their expectation, their lives, everything will surround around themselves, and so they employees will be there, families will be there, and the communities will be there. I think everything will surround around this. So as a company, I think we have taken several steps in terms of several onboarding. I think our management trainees joined in the month of July, first week, and it was quite a new thing for all of them. 30 of them joining virtually, and 30 of them being inducted virtually. I mean, it was a new thing for us also. All the time, all of us would have seen in the life, we are gathering them together in the evening. There is a party, there is a grand gala, dinner for them, and several leaders come and walk in and discuss. This is all virtual. Drink coffee at your home, at your own expenses possibly, and lead from the. I mean, listen to the leaders. So that was kind of theme which really worked well. I think the onboarding exercise experience for them and also for us, I think it was both for us a learning exercise, I think. And not only this, several other areas I say, because I don't restrict my discussion only on the corporate. I'm moving to the manufacturing side, the supply side, and also the sales side of the organization, where I think the recruitment, which was again a unique thing. So we are virtually talking to a medical representative basis, his qualification and experience in West Bengal. It was a new experience for him. Virtual interview, video interview was all new for him. So I think from there to onboarding him, to inducting him, to providing him virtual training, that is how I think this COVID has taught all of us. And what Neha has rightly said, what has not been done by anybody has been done by COVID. And sometimes, whether we should, I always think that whether we should thank COVID or we should say that, sorry, because of COVID, several things have impacted us. But really, it has given a new lease of life to several processes in HR. Several digital journeys that we were only embarking upon and listening to various, I think the seminars and meetings, etc., have now become a virtual, has been used now. On a regular basis now. It has become a part of your life. It has become a new normal for all of us. And during this time, I think not only in the people, in terms of process, as I said, one is manage people with the emotions and manage all your processes with logic. I think we have built all the logic around it in terms of how do we not misuse any of this facility. What Mr. Nair has rightly said, there were certain cases of digital, I would not say a theft, but data being transmitted from one area to another. Suddenly you have seen some upsurge of data getting downloaded. Employees who are resigning, so typically you provide all the necessary detail to them, and they are kind of downloading your company details. Maybe employees are from R&D, maybe employees are from some of the critical function. So I think these are some of the very new things possibly organizations is also trying to learn and move towards that direction. So I think it's a learning experience. Virtual, as you are rightly saying, people, processes, and technology in each of these area, we need to review everything, revise everything, and learn and unlearn everything. I think that has been the, ask from all of us.
Perfect, sir. Makes sense. Yeah, review, relearn, all of these three things. That's the bottom line. And I think the point that you mentioned at the very beginning will stay with me. People will be people at the end of the day. It's up to us to make sure that we make the most of them. All right, sir. Thank you. Ashwin, can I have your thoughts on this again? So the question is, with COVID-19 becoming a part of life, what does the future of work look like in terms of people, process, and technology?
Yeah, for me, basically, one of the key things which is there is that this resolves the human technology paradox. We always used to think saying that technology is against human beings, but this is one time where in which we are realizing technology is actually helping human beings. And the future of any organization now is basically how do we integrate human beings into the technology, which is the key, which is what Neha was mentioning about during her this one, the technology being an integral part of your competency set, and not only just that, it also becomes a part of your routine daily living which is there, and it will start playing a larger role as compared to what it was playing in the past. Second thing, when I look into the future, is basically gig economy becomes more relevant, more prominent, and I think that's a place where people like team leads can actually really play this one, because you are in the node or the junction of corporate versus the people which is there, and possibly when the gig economy really takes up, you can actually really use that to integrate the gig economy into the corporate world itself. And even now also we are seeing, especially in my head office at Finland, a huge amount of the IT workforce which is there, whereas basically, they are basically consultants and people who are doing one-off kind of things, which is that somebody comes and does, one kind of a dashboard or one kind of this one, which is there, and then he moves out, somebody else comes and does something else, which is there. So this is now becoming more and more people who are not on your on-roll payroll, or not even on the off-roll payroll, but they just come and do some work for you and then move out, which is basically what's happening, which is being used across the organizations everywhere. The third thing which is there is basically like definitely digitalization and automation of repetitive and non-contact technologies wherever available. That will come into the forefront in the near future. That's one thing which is there. And for me, from a leadership perspective, the biggest challenge for the leadership is basically how do how the organizations can actually create a atmosphere where in which the humans and the machines and the technology, they can all be integrated together to create a way forward for you. And therefore, the leadership has to do three things at the same time. One is basically stage a return to the work. Second is basically leverage all the advancements which you have. And third is basically create a way forward for the entire organization itself.
Right. So you're saying that there'll be far more infusion of gig workforce, and there'll be far more automation again of repetitive routine processes where you don't really need so many people. So more specialization and more sort of variabilization of costs in a sense. Okay, fantastic. I think now we've discussed about the impact of COVID on your respective businesses and how you've problem solved for them. How exactly have you been juxtaposing virtual work with the old ways of doing work? What is the future of work going to look like now? It'll be great if you can summarize it now. What have been the key shifts, or what are the key shifts that your respective function? I think for 3 out of 4 in this panel, it's going to be HR function, and for Mr. Ashwin, it's going to be business function. What are the key shifts that your respective function need to make in the next decade? Are we looking at reimagining the future role of your respective vertical while assisting in business continuity and fluidity with new norms? Can I start with Mr. Aniruddha? Yeah. Sir, you're talking on mute.
So it is not a work from home. I think it is work from anywhere, which will be a new requirement. I think I have seen several colleagues of mine who are stationed actually in Mumbai have migrated to their places, and they are operating from there, and they are not facing any issues. So what would have been a difficult exercise some months before or a year before, it has become an easy exercise. So I think the time to come, I think employees can operate from whenever they are. And we need to, as a company, we need to provide all necessary tools and support to them. And definitely managing their emotions, managing the family life and that line. So I will take you in the month of March, when we started this, there was no lunch break. There was no time meeting that was ending before 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock sometime. But now at least some discipline has been put in place. People know they respect your time. The meeting doesn't start at 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. Neither it ends at 9 o'clock or so, barring few of them. Of course, when you are in the multinational environment, sometimes it is a requirement. But by and large, people have become disciplined, and I think this will continue. I think this is a good beginning where people have learned how do they respect each other even virtually, and I think this is new ways of working which will adopt in the how in the time to come. And hybrid model which I was talking to you about, it's not necessarily all the time work from home. Time to come when COVID definitely will go down, and we are seeing the decline just now as we speak, and it will go down over a period of time, maybe another 3 to 6 months from now. And I see a hybrid model which will be put in place. Maybe some of the employees can work from home permanently, and it is a very good thing for when your diversity and inclusion agenda. A lot of females, the where they are single mother or where post maternity, etc. They can utilize this time from work from home on a long-term basis instead of having bound by the rules which were put in place that you can only work for 4 days in a month or 5 days in a month, etc. Now operate as many days as possible, and I think that norm is already put in place. So that is what I see future.
Great, sir. Thank you so very much. Mr. Ashwin, your thoughts, please.
Yeah. So as far as if we are looking at in the next decade, which is going to be there, okay. I think there is going to be, like Mr. Gunde was mentioning, a hybrid model of people working from all, maybe some people working from home, some people working from the office, and not all of them coming to the office every single day of the week, which is also a possibility which is there. If I look at manufacturing, okay, so today if you look at the manufacturing is a monolithic structure which is there. You have everything into one single place. But the future looks like more like a distributed manufacturing, which is there, where in which your manufacturing is actually spread across a lot of other various locations. Maybe not even manufactured by you, but manufactured by a third party or a co-packer or somebody else who is doing it for you. Okay. This kind of distributed manufacturing is basically what the future, from the manufacturing perspective, that's where the future is. Above all, if you look at the leadership for the next 10 decade challenge, which is there, how do we integrate human beings into a technology? That's going to be the single important question, which will be, daunting the leaderships for the next, at least the 5 to 7 years, which I can foresee. Okay, because we have, embarked on a irreversible path of, integrating technology more and more. I remember, 5 years back when we had this, whenever we used to have this strategy sessions, which are there. Digitalization and the technologies used to be, it's also, one of the part of the things which used to be there, which is never in the forefront. But today, every discussion about technologies, every discussion about the strategy is all about, how do you digitalize, how do you automate, and therefore, integrating people into this, the newly evolved work environment will be the key challenge which leadership will be facing for at least in the next foreseeable future, which is there.
Okay, so interesting point. See, the contract manufacturing is already very big. So a lot of companies are just focused on marketing now and branding, but then everything else is outsourced. So you're saying it's going to become even bigger now going forward.
Bigger and distributed. So
more distributed, right?
You don't face the challenges of localized challenges which many of the companies, especially like in the automotive space, which is actually facing. That goes away completely by distributed manufacturing, which is there.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough. Ms. Devika, can I get your thoughts on this?
From an HR perspective, Bala, two words come to my mind actually: agility and culture. So if I talk about the first one, agility, I guess that will really define across. So be it your workforce models, and maybe companies like TeamLease can help us, uh, or the roles, new roles that will emerge, maybe hybrid roles will emerge, structures, looking at the composition of the workforce, and also in terms of learning. But not only that limited, we'll have to, as HR, build this capacity or capability in the entire organization, from employees to leadership, to be agile. So that's something will define, I feel, the next decade. The second element is culture. Culture for me stood really very strong during this time as well. As I said, people coming together, and that's how we could sail through this entire environment. So while external talent or internal talent will be looking at the best in class practices and enablers, but at the same time, how we stand by our values, how do we with those best in class practices still maintain the value set and live that value set and role model it each day, that will become a biggest attraction, or if I may call a HR word, employee value proposition, a EVP, for the external talent as well. So those are the two things that will stand out.
Culture and agility. All right, makes sense. Perfect. Neha, what are your thoughts on what do you think your function needs to do differently over the next decade?
So, as I think about the road ahead, Bala, one thing that clearly comes to my mind is that technology is going to have a very, very predominant role in shaping the role or the structure of HR, right? From your processes around onboarding to employee well-being to health and safety to entire employee experience concept, technology is going to be an underlying, and that brings me to the fact that the competencies of HR also need to have an element around. That technological inclusion into the competency set. That said, it's also important that we maintain that balance of that human touch and technology. Now, we do see a lot of chatbots, AI being introduced into the HR processes and function, but our global talent trends study through a very, very interesting result, wherein people were actually questioning the data that was being collected by AI or accessed by AI for employees. I mean, it was personal and professional data that was easily accessible through these artificial intelligence tools. And how HR was going to use that data was something that formed the reason for concern for employees. So how do you ensure that trust and that balance of human touch between the use of technology and the human face of the human resource function is something very, very critical in times to come as well. How the HR function supports and shapes the leaders is something which is going to be very critical, because the leadership style is going to define how our future looks like. And that would probably hold true across industries as well. Some industries may require a different style of leadership to help them sail through, and some others may have a very, very different need for a certain type of a leadership style. So how HR as a function supports the leadership style through these years is going to be paramount as well. Now, we've also had a very, very huge focus on involving our people through the entire process. Now, we've kept them informed at every level. Mercer has come up with a new service offering in terms of an adaptive working model, which tells you how your roles can flex and how many of your roles can flex, to what extent. So some of these will require a lot of involvement with your people and across levels as well. So these are some of the key things that you need to keep in mind when you talk about HR as a function, and the value that you continue to generate for your business as an HR function. Now, traditionally, HR has always been a support function, but today the role of HR has been integrated into key business strategies. Unless you have a key say in defining the business strategies, you're not supporting in optimal value generation for your firm. So as an HR function, it's critical how you generate that value for your organization as well. And just to sum it up, I think I keep going back to this quote by Diane Gerson, the chief human resource officer for IBM, that this is our time. The last crisis was, it was a critical role played by the CFO in getting us out of the last crisis, but this is essentially the time of the HR. This time, it's the CHROs who will play a critical role in getting us out of this crisis. So it is all about how you manage your people, how you manage your leaders, and how you manage your processes at the end of the day. And HR has a critical role to play in all of these.
So when you say last crisis, you are referring to the economic crisis in 2008.
Economic crisis.
Okay, all right. Thank you so very much. So we've collected a lot of questions from the audience across various platforms over the course of this discussion, and we can see that many of the questions have been addressed by some speaker or the other. And what we've done is those questions which haven't been addressed and which need to be addressed now have also been thrown into my rapid fire questions. So we can get started with that. Let me start with Mr. Ashwin for the rapid fire round. When do you think we'll go back to pre-COVID levels of growth?
Okay. Are we looking at the globe or are we looking at India?
Let's talk about India, sir.
Okay. So if India possibly 2022 end, maybe FY23 is basically where we'll be back on track. Of course, aided by there are already green shoots of growth which is visible in the economy, and aided by a lot of government support which is actually coming up. I think we are pumping money from a helicopter, like Alan Greenspan said during the American crisis, and that's exactly what our government is actually following as a template. I think that they are going to really bear fruit, and we will be able to turn around the leaf by FY23.
Okay, FY23 then. So basically your projection is along the lines of what World Bank projected as well. Okay, so second question. Would there be lesser jobs in India in the next 12 months?
Next 12 months, no. There will be increased jobs everywhere. That's primarily because, like I mentioned, saying that, if you look at manufacturing, which is one of the key job creators, which is there, or if you look at IT, which is there, both of them are actually now using a lot of distributed manufacturing, distributed functioning, which is there, which basically means that there are a lot of more jobs which should be naturally being created because of this, the way they operate.
Okay. Will average salaries go down in the next few quarters?
Difficult to say. It depends upon which industry are you working in. It's not a global phenomenon or this one. It is very sector specific and very your skill specific and talent specific. So some of the jobs will actually see a lot of increase in their salaries because they are in high demand at the moment.
Right. Do you think organizations will have an antibiotic reaction towards anything fixed offices, fixed workforce, fixed salaries, etc. going forward?
No, the offices will continue to remain there because they have a function irrespective of where you work from. The offices will still remain there because that represents an organization at the physical space. So they will continue to exist. And therefore, I don't think it's going to substantially change anything. Of course, the way of work will change, but I don't think the physical spaces are going to disappear anytime soon.
Okay, fair enough. COVID has proven that work from home is a viable alternative. Can this become a sustainable reality in India?
Yes, it can.
Okay.
It is already happening. And I think in the near future, like Mr. Kunde mentioned, it will be a hybrid model of some people working from the offices, some people working from the home, some people working in the factories. So that's how it is going to be.
All right. What percentage of your workforce will permanently work from home?
Difficult to say, depending upon industry. If I talk about Lindstorm, around 20-25% of our workforce will be permanently working from home, especially those who are there in the support functions. For example, you don't need an accountant to be there in the office every single day of the week. You might as well work from home. You don't need a designer to be at your office every single day of the week. He can might as well work from home permanently. So
Okay. What is your single biggest technology investment to get ready for post-COVID scenario?
Single biggest technology investment would be moving a lot of our processes into the virtual space, and which is happening with the help of a lot of software, which is there. In fact, luckily for us, many of these softwares already were in existence. It's just that we are now utilizing 100% of those technologies which were already previously available.
Right. Okay. You are part of an MNC, not just you. I think all four eminent panelists we have today are all part of MNC. Some are Indian MNCs, some are global MNCs, but MNCs nevertheless. So, Ashwin, being part of an MNC, do you think Indian organizations have handled this crisis better than our foreign counterparts?
Yes, I would say largely, because we are a resilient country. Basic nature of our country is a very resilient one. We have been impacted by, in every year, let's forget the COVID. Otherwise also some part of the country goes under flood, some part of the country goes under a cyclone, some part of the country has got drought crises. We have, so as a country, we are a very resilient one. And I remember in 1993 bomb blast, I was in Bombay during that particular time. The very next day, my office had 95% attendance. Damn the bomb there. People were, not even bothered about a bomb blast which at the same time when I was in London, there was a metro bomb crisis. Next day, it was like a desert. So, we as a country, we are a very, very resilient people who are there. Crises are nothing for us, So I would say that, even COVID, our response to COVID and the way we have reacted as compared to some of the other countries in the world, it has been exceptionally well.
Great to hear that exceptional optimism, Ashwin. Thank you. Lastly, is there going to be less investment in infra and more into human capital?
That's a difficult question to answer because if you're looking at the overall infra from an organizational perspective, no, that is going to remain where it is. But like mentioned, we will be focusing on the human capital more, especially upskilling people. Giving more space to people giving more space for people to grow their skills is basically where the investments will be coming up.
Okay. All right. Great. Fantastic, Ashwin. Thank you so very much. Neha, if I can move on to you, same set of questions. Number one, when do you think we will go back to pre-COVID levels of growth? You can give an India perspective to all these questions.
I think I wouldn't, I would agree to a large extent with what Ashwin also said. I think different sectors have started showing a recovery rate at different pace, and that would depend largely on different industries, the kind of businesses they are in, and the demand for their solutions and offerings. But I think I personally also believe 2023 financial year is when we're most likely to go back to the pre-COVID growth rates.
Okay. Would there be lesser jobs in India in the next 12 months?
Definitely not. I would say, again, as I said, the workforce composition is likely to get relooked. Different organizations may go in for a different structure of workforce, but number of jobs going down, I certainly don't feel that's going to be the case. But having said that, people will certainly need to reskill and upskill themselves to be able to meet the needs of the future of work. The future of work definitely is nowhere close to what it used to be, at least pre-COVID. So agility, the adaptability and reskilling is something which is going to be the key in terms of meeting those demands for workforce.
Okay. Will average salaries go down in the next few quarters?
I wouldn't say it may go down on an average scale. And again, we have a series of rewards conclaves that is going on. I'm sure you may be aware of that. Mercer has a rewards vertical that focuses largely on reward trends. Now, different industries may show different trends in terms of the reward strategy being adopted by organizations, but I do feel that there will be a certain shift in the composition of rewards. So while some of the roles were largely fixed compensation based, there would be elements of variable pay playing a more predominant role into those, or probably pay for performance is likely to be more predominant. So I think these are some of the factors that will drive the reward philosophy going forward. But average salaries, I don't see on an average from an industry-wide perspective is going to take a major hit.
That's a fair answer. Okay. Do you think organizations will have an antibiotic reaction towards anything fixed? Fixed offices, fixed workforce, fixed salaries, etc.?
It's definitely a mind shift change, Bala. So for us, if you ask me honestly, we've had this diagnostic tool applied on us from Mercer India, the adaptive working tool that I spoke about earlier. And we do realize that almost 97-98% of our roles can flex and they can work from home certain days in a week. So if we were to apply that to our context going forward, we'll most likely see close to about, say, 60 to 70% of our workforce in office on any particular day. And that will certainly have an impact on our real estate strategy as well. So I think a lot of organizations will be compelled to look at some of their fixed costs. But again, it would be largely dependent on the kind of setup that you have. A lot of strategy would get derived from the mixed or hybrid workforce model that both Aniruddha and Ashwin also spoke about.
Right. Okay. COVID has proven that work from home is a viable alternative. Can this become a sustainable reality in India?
Absolutely.
Okay.
A lot of organizations have opened up to the possibility of working from home, and they've seen that this works in most cases. I think that's certainly a choice for consideration going forward for most organizations as well.
Okay. What percentage of your workforce will permanently work from home?
I think I've already answered that in the previous question.
Yes. What is your single biggest technology investment to get ready for post-COVID scenario?
I think investment in enabling our technology infrastructure. I think work from home, as I said earlier, it wasn't new to us as a concept. But if it becomes a more frequent mode of working for you, you need to have solid infrastructure in place to support that kind of work model for you. So that's something which is definitely going to be a key investment for us in terms of an technology infrastructure. And I think also technology in terms of some of our HR processes, while we've been making a lot of investment over the past few years, but that investment is also likely to continue in times to come in terms of ensuring there are infusions of technology into some of our employee experience or employee life cycle processes as well.
Okay. Again, you are also a part of an MNC, part of Marshall McLennan Group. So do you think Indian organizations have handled this crisis better than our foreign counterparts?
I would think so. And a large part of that response also alludes to the fact that Ashwin mentioned that as a country, we are very, very resilient. And again, I'll just take a small example of our sister concern. We have a large shared space, a shared services entity also in India, which is largely spread across NCR. And while work from home was a reality for Mercer Consulting workforce, it wasn't the case for our shared services employees. And we did a fantastic job of delivering desktops and all related IT infrastructure to all people to enable them to work from home within the first 2 weeks of the lockdown being implemented and the work from home getting implemented. So I think that large scale and the way we were able to actually respond to the situation in such a short span of time goes on to say how we are agile and how we're resilient in terms of responding to a crisis situation like this.
Right. Great. Lastly, is there going to be less investment in infra and more into human capital?
I would say it's going to be a balance between both. While on the human capital front, it's going to be largely around reskilling, upskilling, and building more agility into our workforce. An equal amount of focus will need to go into infra as well. And when I say infra, maybe not so much into the fixed infrastructure, but on the technology front. Of course, those kind of investments will take a more predominant role for organizations going forward as well.
Right. So infra as in not the infra that we are used to, but then a different kind of infra. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fantastic. Thanks, Neha. Mr. Aniruddha, same questions. So Aniruddha, when do you think we'll go back to pre-COVID levels of growth? Again, India perspective.
I think, it will be more, company to company, product to product, process to process, depending on as a country, but it is definitely within the 18 months that I see. Okay. But still, some of these sectors may continue to lag behind their scheduled target, possibly for few more months to go, especially mining, coal, etc., which are still getting impacted because of the COVID, manufacturing being down in most of the countries. However, I see 18 to 19 months should be, as a country, we should be up and running on our feet.
Okay, fair enough. Would there be lesser jobs in India in the next 12 months?
See, jobs depend on the skill, requirement in the industry. Some of the skills are not being required, and possibly I don't mind saying that, we will have some loss of job in that sectors, definitely. We should not be saying that. And it's a truth which we'll have to speak out. I mean, we are not a politician to say that it is not going to happen. It is going to happen. Some of the skills may not be needed, and therefore, possibly, Bala, your company's role as a social entity also, I would say that reskilling would be a little more, required. Not only, along with the industry partners like us, and we are willing to do that. We have been already working in this sector as a skill development area. Through our CSR project. So there are 17 or 18 projects in CIPLA which is running today. We are upskilling, several social, segments in this area. Not necessarily they are useful for CIPLA, but they will be useful. At least they will be gainful again. That was the agenda.
Fair enough. Great. Do you think average salaries will go down in the next few quarters?
It may not go down in certain sector. If the employee lose the job itself, I think they will lose everything, their livelihood itself. But the increase may not be as it was in the past. At least, if not, at least people will continue to retain the job and retain the salaries as too.
Got it. So more of stagnation, you are saying, not much of an increase, not much of a decrease as well.
Not much.
Okay. Do you think organizations will have an antibiotic reaction towards anything fixed going forward? Fixed offices, fixed workforce, fixed salaries, etc.
So, see, it depends on the organizational model of that specific company. For example, we are a large-scale manufacturing company. and also sales organization. So I don't think in infrastructure. So for example, in any case, my sales organization was not needing any infrastructure as such, even in the past. Most of the medical representatives, the area business manager, regional managers used to operate from home only, or their specific towns where there was no fixed office for them. So I think there is no change in the sales and marketing organization as also in the manufacturing organization. But what you are asking, definitely there will be huge change in the employees who are working from the offices.
Okay. COVID has proven that work from home is a viable alternative. Can this become a sustainable reality in India?
Yeah, of course, it will become a sustainable option without a doubt. I think, as I said in the past, so we were wondering whether, and to be honest to you, I have hardly work from home. Considering my overall portfolio, I always thought work from home is not an easy option for me. But that has become a reality. So I can't say today any function, any specific area, any specific sub area, you cannot work from home. It is possible.
Right. Great. What percentage of your workforce will permanently work from home?
I think if not less, I think in the offices sector and the R&D area, I would put easily 35 to 40% people will work from home easily.
Okay. What is your single biggest technology investment to get ready for post-COVID scenario?
So I think what we are doing, we are reimagining. Today we are talking about reimagining people, process, and technology. As a company, we are reimagining, in fact, everything. In fact, it is one of the theme on which surrounding which we are working. So we are revisiting the entire manufacturing process. Can it be a touchless factory tomorrow? Can a pharma factory, which is today, you require several set of people, can it be completely touchless tomorrow? Can my labs, which are testing various chemicals and products which is consumed by the human being, can it be touchless chemical testing? And therefore Neha may not like, but we are working with KPMG for that matter, and we are working with KPMG, and we are almost 350 to 400 crores have been separately allocated to this project. And we want to see a digital lighthouse, as we are calling out, in one of the site which will divest, and we'll bring another site for the digital journey. So that is the investment that I'm seeing in the technology space.
Right. So more of process innovation oriented investments. Okay. So again, Cipla is an MNC. It's an Indian MNC, but still nevertheless an MNC with operations in more than 150 countries, or rather sales at least in more than 150 countries, right? So do you think Indian organizations have handled this crisis better than foreign counterparts?
Yeah, definitely what everybody has been saying, definitely I'm Indian and I should be proud that we are resilient without a doubt. But most of the time, having worked with MNCs like GSK, I see the resilience in Indians is short term versus the resilience in our counterpart working outside the India. They think on a very long term basis. So I think we as a country need to learn that art of how do you think beyond certain period of time. We are very short term oriented to my knowledge. And I know that my views are sometimes not so easy to digest, but this is my view. And we should think for that matter, not as and see this 5 team member is not going to change the fate of the country. There are several layers of people who are politicians and bureaucrats and everybody who also need to think this, that though we are a resilient country and people, but we need to think on a long-term basis. And we have seen our crisis specifically coming not because of inability of Indian to manage, but inability of our, the government and the bureaucrats unable to manage the crisis itself.
Absolutely. Okay. Is there going to be less investment in infra and more into human capital going forward?
Infra, yes. Fixed infra, definitely we will reduce our dependence on some offices, etc. Definitely. But on the human being, it will go up. We will like employees to work from home and on an easy environment. I think the future will be how do you embed technology, compliance and privacy in the entire system.
Right. Okay, so Aniruddha, thank you so much for your candid and outspoken views. I'm not sure how many people would have liked to hear these things, but I think people need to hear them as well. It's important for us to get to understand what you think at a deep level, at a deep subconscious level, that you think these are the things which are actually going to happen as to how things are going to pan out, and they ran true. I agree with most of the things that you said. Okay. And Ms. Devika, again, same set of questions.
Can I just say cut, copy, paste?
Sorry?
Can I just say cut, copy, paste?
Whose responses? There were three people that went ahead.
Yeah. Okay, I'll make it quick. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. We'll actually make it a rapid fire round for you then, Devika.
Yeah.
So when do you think we'll go back to pre-COVID levels of growth?
2 years.
Okay. Would there be lesser jobs in India in the next 12 months?
No, not at all.
Okay. Average salaries will go down in the next few quarters?
It will be differentiated, the salaries for talent. Average may remain the same.
Got it. Okay. Do you think organizations will have an antibiotic reaction towards anything fixed offices, fixed workforce, fixed salaries, etc.?
No, it will have to be more flexible in terms of having a hybrid model. Yeah.
Okay. COVID has proven that work from home is a viable alternative. Can this become a sustainable reality in India?
It has already become.
Okay. Correct. Fair enough. What percentage of your workforce will permanently work from home, Devika?
It will depend on the roles and mainly the support verticals, I would say, because we're primarily a sales organization, and sales and manufacturing will continue to go in the field and obviously production. Yeah.
Okay. So if you were to put a number to it, what percentage will it be?
10 to 15%.
Okay. What is your single biggest technology investment to get?
With all our processes, we are really looking and seeing that how they can be more technology oriented.
Okay. Again, AkzoNobel is an MNC. You are part of it. So do you think Indian organizations have handled this crisis better than our foreign counterparts?
Can I say a big no? See, I'm part of a MNC, and not only because I'm part of one and in India, but I've seen the way AkzoNobel has operated in different countries as well during this time. And I'm really proud of the way the employees have been taken care of. So I would say it would be equal. It would be equal for Indian and MNCs. Yeah.
Okay. Is there going to be less investment in infra and more into human capital going forward?
There can be never less investment in human capital. So it will only increase, I feel, each day.
Okay. All right. I think that completely rounds out everything that we had for today. I think we overshot by about 5-6 minutes or so. I'm sorry about that. But you've been a wonderful panel of speakers. Thank you so very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very
I
nice.
thoroughly enjoyed being there, and of course, the company of such eminent speakers as well.
Absolutely.
So very nice to interact with all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bala.
Thank you so much. And it was a great learning actually for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful privilege to be hosting such an extraordinary league of gentlemen and ladies. Thank you.